PineScript, you have access to pretty limited data for your current symbol and time frame. But fortunately, there is ways to get much more data, and in this section we'll go through some function that allows you to get much more interesting data. And let's start probably with the most powerful function in PineScript. For that, it's a request.security function. And idea of this function is pretty simple. So you can get different symbols or different time frames data with this symbol. So let's go through some examples to see how this function works in details. So here's the simplest possible examples. So I call request.security function, and it has three main arguments. The first one is symbol, what data do you want to get for. Next is your time frame, so 60 means that these are minutes, and the last argument, third argument, is your expression. What do you want to compute for your Tesla, for example, in this case. And here I just output my close value, but later I will show you that you can actually do much more complicated things with security functions. Also, in security function, you can use your symbol together with exchange. So if your symbol can be traded on different exchanges, this way you can be sure that you're using the right data in your script. So you can use it by just adding your exchange code and then colon and then your symbol. So it's quite simple. Also, you can use as a symbol syminfo.tickerid built-in variable, and this way you will always get data for the same symbol you have on your chart. So it's quite useful as well. I use it all the time in my scripts. So here I have a few more like security function calls with different time frames. Here, for example, I have 4-hour chart, and as you can see, I list here 240. So in PineScript, if you have like a time frame starting from 1 minute up to 1 day, you have to use a minutes for that. So for 4-hour chart, I have to use 240 minutes. So this is a 4-hour chart basically. And here, for example, I have a request for a daily chart. So I can put here 1 day or just letter D for a daily chart. Also, as a time frame, you can use a time frame dot period built-in variable, and this always stores your current chart time frame. So this way you can be sure that you're working in the same time frame, for example, if you can probably get different symbol data for it. Also, now let's look at expression and what you can do with expressions. What data can you get? So first of all, you can actually compute some expressions on it. So here, for example, I get difference between my open and close, and I compute this in my security function call, so it's quite easy. Also, you can compute a variable like I do here, and after that you can pass this variable in your security function call, and PineScript will look at your variable, how is it computed, and will do the same computation on symbols you selected and a time frame you selected, and will return its value. So it's quite useful. Special case of variables for security function is so-called self-reference variables. So we already talked about them in this course, and here how it works. Basically, this is a variable that depend on previous values of the same variable, and by default it won't work for you in security function calls. So for example, here I compute this variable, and when I try to call this variable in security function call, this will give me an error, and this code won't work. Solution for that is pretty simple. You just have to create like a function, and in this function you have to compute your built-in your variable the same way, and after that you have to call your function in security function call, and this will work fine for you. So this is the solution for self-reference variables in PineScript with security function. So another nice thing about security function calls is that actually you can return multiple values from it as well. So here, for example, I have a custom MACD function, and it outputs me 3 values, and I can compute this function in my security call, and it will computes it, and it will return all 3 values to my script. And this way you can do pretty complicated things and output quite a lot of information from other like symbols from other time frames, so it's quite useful. Now let's check a few optional parameters of request.security function and how these parameters works. So the first parameters I want to talk about is gaps, and it can has 2 values, barmanage.gaps_off and gaps_on. So this means that you can choose how do you want PineScript to work with data if data has any gaps. So you can choose gaps_off parameter, and in this case PineScript will try to fill data. So it will look at the gaps, and it will fill them with the last available value. And you can choose to have gaps on. This means that you will get just not available for any gaps in your data. Another pretty important parameter of a security function is look ahead, and it can have one of 2 values, barmanage.lookahead_off or lookahead_on. And if you're using barmanage.lookahead_on, you're kind of forced PineScript to look into the future. Let me explain you how it works. So imagine you're working with intraday time frame, and you want to get data for daily chart. And if you want, for example, to get like daily close, when you're using lookahead_on, PineScript will give you actually like daily close even if you're still intraday. So it kind of looks into the future and will get daily close for you. And of course, in real life, it's not possible, and this is why you need to be careful with the look ahead parameter if you're working on strategies, because it can actually give you unrealistic result. So default value is barmanage lookahead_off, when you will get like previous close for your daily chart, and this is much more realistic approach. Another parameter of security function is ignore invalid symbols, and it can be true or false. So if it's true and you try to pass symbol that doesn't exist, you won't get like an error as usual, and your just variable will be just not available, and your script will be still executed. Default value is false, and if you're trying to pass your like wrong symbol, you will get an error and you won't see anything on your chart. It will just PineScript will stop executing your script completely. Another useful parameter in a security function is currency. So basically you can specify, for example, that I want to get data for like Tesla stock, but I want this to be in euros. And PineScript will automatically go and find Forex rate, and will convert your like Tesla price from like USDs to euros automatically, and your variable will be actually in euros. And actually, if you kind of work on like multi currency indicators, this can be a really useful parameter for you. And let's speak about some limitations you have with security function calls. So first of all, don't try to get data for a lower time frame, because it might get tricky. So for example, if you're working like with 1 hour time frame and you try to get like 1 minute time frame, so PineScript has to return to you like for 60 bars in 1 minute, it has to output you only one value, but which one it would output for you, it's a bit tricky, and it's really not so obvious how it works. So basically, if you can do that in the end, and it will output you something, but PineScript do not recommend doing that. And if you want to work on multiple time frames, try to put your chart on the lowest time frame possible and get data only for higher time frame. This way your script will be much more stable. Also, there are a few other limitations you have on your request.security function call. So first of all, there is limit of 40 security function calls in one script. You cannot do more, and there is no way around it. So this is the limit. And for example, I have some scripts developed for example, screeners, and the maximum amount of symbol I can get there, it's only 40. This is why. Also, when you call your security function, you have some limitations on how it can be called. I don't think you can call it like in a loop, for example, and a symbol cannot be dynamic. You cannot compute it in your script, for example. Also, you cannot call it in functions and so on. So usually when you write your script, you have kind of this obvious like calls when you define your like symbol, time frame, and like expression you want to compute. It's hard to do something very, very dynamic with it. So I think that's all about security function.